Welcome back to our channel. On today's video, we have a lot of information to go over. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis signs House Bill 1365, which will make it arrestable offense for a homeless person to sleep on the streets. We're going to go over what this law actually entitles and what some county officials are already saying regarding the implementation of this law. The law stipulates that on a county level, each county will have to designate a place for the homeless people to live. In other words, in theory, the state of Florida will allow counties to create homeless camps instead of these improvised camps like we've been showcasing on our channel. There'll be a place where the homeless people can live. In a perfect world, these homeless camps would provide people who are homeless a safe place to sleep with access to restrooms and clean running water. However, in reality, I'm going to explain to you why this perfect dream of Florida allowing homeless camps is going to be an utter and complete failure. I would really like to give the state of Florida the benefit of the doubt with this implementation of this new law. However, the same county officials who sat down next to the governor while he signed this bill and encouraged this new bill, we're talking about the commissioners of Miami Beach. He went on America TV and he said, this isn't going to happen. We're not going to allow homeless camps in Florida. In particular, Dade County. Dade County officials are saying, hey, we are definitely not going to create homeless camps. Florida counties are not going to create homeless camps, and they are going to start arresting homeless people because they're not taking advantage of the homeless shelters, which in theory exist. And this is really where this law will make absolutely no difference for the vast majority of the homeless people in Florida. For one, because Florida counties are already coming up and saying, we're not going to do this. These places are not going to exist. Dade County, where this law originated, Dade County is saying, hey, we are not going to create homeless camps. Our prisons are empty, and so are our homeless shelters. If you are homeless, you can go to prison, you can go to a homeless shelter. So in other words, this law is really somewhat of a tyrannical, almost anti-constitutional law that's going to force people that are homeless in Florida to have no other option but to go to jail. Because again, the state of Florida's counties are saying, we're not going to create homeless camps. In theory, these county-controlled homeless camps already existed in Gainesville, Florida, and they got shut down because they simply did not function. We saw in Gainesville, Florida, how the implementation of a homeless camp, allowing people to camp out somewhere, even with access to clean running water and bathrooms, simply created an absolute nightmare, and they closed it down because it didn't function. So this isn't some uncharted territory in Florida. It's already been proven that these types of places don't function in the state. Let's take a look at some of the vocabulary used in this law. It says that the Department of Children and Families may inspect the property and recommend decertification. In other words, DCF can come in and say, hey, this place is not going to work. And most likely, that's exactly what they're going to do, because they're not going to allow the general living conditions and circumstances that are going to unfold in these homeless camps to be under their supervision. So even if a county were to create a homeless camp, DCF would most likely shut it down. Personally, I would love for this program to work. If this program were to work, it would provide somewhat adequate conditions for many of the homeless people that are living in Florida. On a recent tour, we discovered somebody that was 72 years old, somebody who's sick and elderly, living in a homeless camp. In theory, this law would provide people like that a better place to be. But in reality, in all general purposes, you have two aspects of this law. One aspect is that they're going to arrest anyone who's sleeping on the streets. And the other aspect is that the state of Florida is going to create a place for those people to go so they don't have to sleep on the street. The problem is that the latter part of this law will never take place.
Aquí jamás va a existir campos de campaña en Miami Beach.
And that's what the county officials in Florida are saying. They're saying we are not going to create homeless camps in our counties. So the law, when you read the whole thing, it says, well, you're going to be arresting them, but well, they'll have a place to go. But in reality, if you know the state of Florida, they're not going to have a place to go. They're going to go straight to being arrested. So let's understand this law very clearly. The law has two strong aspects. One, if you're homeless on the streets, you're going to get arrested, but we're going to create a place for you to go. But they're not really going to create a place for you to go. They're just going to be arresting you. In theory, the law on paper looks functional, it looks great, but in practice, the counties are already saying, we're not going to do this. If you're homeless in our county, you're getting arrested. In all practical purposes, I do believe that even the Supreme Court could get involved and tell the state of Florida, hey, you can't just start arresting these people. The law does provide that you are allowed to lodge or reside overnight in a motor vehicle that is registered, insured, and is located in a place where it's allowed to be. So if you are currently homeless in the state of Florida and living out of your vehicle, as long as you have permission to be in that parking spot, you are allowed to sleep in your vehicle as long as the vehicle is legally registered. But even if these homeless camps did exist, if a county did designate a homeless camp for their county and the DCF didn't shut it down, the law clearly denotes that for a continuous period of no longer than 1 year. Thus, these will not be permanent places. They'll be nothing more than a temporary solution. In the state of Florida, homeless people are going to be arrested for sleeping outside. But these counties have absolutely no intention of creating homeless camps. And even if they did, they would be at the mercy of DCF, which would easily be able to decertify the place if they wanted to. Most likely they will. But even then, it is only for a 1 year period, which makes the question of, are you really going to install water and other facilities that are only going to be there temporarily and not permanently? The law also stipulates that these homeless camps cannot be adjacent to residential neighborhoods or businesses. I don't know if you guys know this, but most people that are living in homeless camps are not able to have transportation. Most of them are walking. Many of them are disabled or elderly, and they're not able to walk. Thus, the vast majority of homeless camps in Florida are no more than 500 feet from a convenience store or a grocery store. And over half of the food that the homeless people are eating is not food that is purchased, but recovered from dumpsters overnight. So let's suppose that now the county is going to dictate where these homeless camps have to be, most likely in an area outside of city limits, not near businesses or homes. The homeless people are going to by choice not end up there, because if they did, they wouldn't have access to getting freaking food. If the counties and cities do create homeless camps, for law enforcement, it would be a lot easier to just grab a homeless person and drop them off in a field in the middle of nowhere that gets designated as a homeless camp, and then law enforcement doesn't have to worry about that homeless person being in an urban area bothering people. The problem is that in all practical purposes, these homeless camps do need to be near businesses, because you can't just live in the middle of the woods in the outskirts of the city, and that's exactly what these counties are looking to do. Whatever rural areas are surrounded by these homeless camps will have hundreds of people begging on street corners because they have no other way to get anything. That's kind of what happened in Gainesville, where they saw an explosion of panhandlers, because when people are homeless and they don't have access to dumpster diving so they can get food, then they end up panhandling. The practical application of this law is going to mean that the vast majority of homeless people are not going to volunteer to end up in these places, because living there will be so impractical that they couldn't do it. America TV recently interviewed a homeless guy on the streets of Miami, and he told them he doesn't give a crap what the governor says. He's not going to leave where he's at. The vast majority of homeless people feel that it's hard enough to be homeless without also the state and the county dictating where you have to live. Even without them dictating that, it's already difficult enough. And in fact, many homeless people, specifically those that are the most vulnerable, are the most likely to be transient, trying to escape bad neighborhoods where they're being victimized. In other words, it's the most vulnerable homeless people who need to be transient. Take West Bradenton. This area of the city isn't exactly the worst part of the city, and many of the homeless people from Bradenton that are elderly, disabled, or female have moved into West Bradenton to feel safer, because in the more dangerous parts of the city, they're getting robbed, victimized, and more. I think lawmakers really do not understand this aspect of homelessness. If you have a place where you have a bunch of homeless people that are not criminally minded, they're just regular homeless people living in the woods, and you know where they are, most likely those people are going to be victimized by other homeless people who are more criminally minded. That's exactly why many of the elderly, infirmed, and female homeless people are the most transient. They're constantly moving from place to place to avoid being victimized. Most elderly, sick, infirmed homeless people are not going to want to be a sitting duck in a homeless camp. The fact that the law stipulates that there has to be security at these places doesn't mean that at 2 or 3 in the morning there's going to be a police officer there to protect these homeless people. They're going to be sitting ducks, victims, and most likely these homeless camps are going to become extraordinarily dangerous, perhaps even more dangerous than actual illicit homeless encampments. And that is because most illicit homeless encampments are gang controlled, gang monitored, and these gangs provide security for the homeless people. And in a place like Florida, law enforcement isn't going to protect these homeless people. Thus, if there's a homeless camp that's illicit, it's improvised, it's marginalized, most likely there's a gang there that protects the homeless people. There's people in these homeless camps like the ones we interview. These are guys who've done 20, 15, 30 years for murdering somebody. They're gang affiliated, they're institutionalized, and they make sure that nobody enters the homeless camp who's not supposed to be there. And thus, the people who are elderly and disabled that are living in these homeless camps are under the protection of somebody who has no problem of taking you out, and thus they're safe. But if you grab these homeless people that are vulnerable and you put them in the field somewhere and say law enforcement is going to protect these homeless people, most likely those homeless people are going to be victimized. The homeless people who are not addicted are dealing with a disability. These are genuinely homeless people. They're homeless because of their health or other circumstances, are not going to want to be a sitting duck at a state-run homeless camp. It is just far too dangerous for them. The sad reality is that most people who are disabled are better off being extorted by one of these criminals at a homeless camp for a protection racket to ensure that at least there's this killer guy here who's going to ensure that nobody hurts us, versus ending up in a state-run homeless camp where most likely at 2 or 3 in the morning there isn't going to be security, and then they will be victimized. Thus, most likely homeless people, even those who are needing these services, are going to volunteer not to end up in these spots. It varies from county to county, but let me just give you guys a general idea of what the demographics of Florida homeless people usually is. About 15% of people who are homeless are what I call genuinely homeless. These are people who are disabled, elderly, they just cannot provide housing for themselves. These people, about 15% of them, are genuinely needing help. 15%. Over 80% of what I call genuinely homeless people are being protected on the streets by some type of criminal organization of protecting these people from the general criminal, usually for a small fee, usually a cut of their SSI checks. In other words, homeless people are paying a percentage of their SSI check to a gang to ensure that nobody hurts them. The law specifically prohibits the use of alcohol and illegal substances. I don't know if you know this, but about 80% of the homeless population in a given area of Florida is going to be addicted to illegal substances. And with 35% of them using alcohol on a regular basis, we can pretty much assume that almost 80, maybe 60% of the people that are homeless in Florida are volunteering not to end up in these state-run homeless camps because they are addicted. And that is a fairly generous number. The overwhelming percentage of people that are homeless are dealing with addiction or some type of drinking problem, and thus they're not going to end up in these homeless camps where, one, they're being monitored by all these government agencies, and two, when addiction is like the number one cause of homelessness in your state, you create homeless camps that are illegal, but now people are not allowed to have their substances there. We can pretty much assume that this is going to not work out because you're not addressing the main problem. See, homelessness isn't the main problem. The main problem in Florida is addiction. The state of Florida's overdose death rate is significantly higher than California. But every single time that one of these government officials opens their mouth about homelessness in the state of Florida, they point a finger at California. Homelessness is the symptom of these people's addiction. The core problem is the fact that Florida's overdose death rate right now is almost approaching 40 per 100,000, nearly twice California's overdose rate. What are you really fixing? Is it not the symptoms that these people are having being homelessness, or is homelessness the cause? The real problem in the state of Florida is the massive amounts of addiction that the state has, twice what the state of Texas has, almost twice what the state of California has. Florida is now on par with Appalachia. And if you take a look at some particular parts of Florida, take the congressional district in the far northeast side of Florida. This is where Ron DeSantis was before he was Florida's governor. In that part of Florida, the addiction rate is on par with Appalachia. I've already asked homeless people, and it's less than 20% who will even consider the notion. A huge number of homeless people are by nature, by personal theory, anti-government. They have their anti-government conspiracy. Some of them are far right-wing, and they have the ideology of not letting the government, they don't want to be part of society. These are people that are anti-society, anti-government, anti-structure, and these types of people, no matter what you do to them, they would rather go to prison if they have to, are not going to conform to a government-established anything. About 60% of these homeless people are going to be gang members, or at least under the scope of some type of gang that is protecting them. 80% of them are addicted, and maybe 1 in 4, a small percentage of them have this anti-government philosophy or ideology. That means that they're not going to conform to anything that's structured because it goes against their moral convictions, which are constitutionally protected, whether you agree with them or not. You got this thing here, this extreme right wing. A lot of them are veterans, a lot of them are ex-military, and they're homeless, and they just have this thing where they don't want to participate in anything that's government because they believe it's constitutionally protected, and it probably is. And how do you get those people to conform to living in a society when they are believing that their constitutional rights give them the right to be homeless and not having to take part in any of these economical slaveries that the rest of us are entitled to? At the end of the day, constitutional protected ideologies, addiction, gang membership, these homeless people are not really going to go for this. They are anti-structure, and they don't want that. And a lot of us don't believe that, but if you go and talk to these homeless people like I do, you understand that that's their stance in general. If implemented the way this law is written, it has a huge potential to help the homeless community. However, it's left up to a county level. Some particular counties may actually make proper use of this provision to help alleviate some of their homeless problems. And I do not discard the possibility that somewhere in Florida, there are going to be counties that are going to make great things happen. And I know that there's going to be particular counties that are going to do a great job for a fact. Take the county of Collier. The St. Matthew's House and other programs in that county are so efficient that they really do not have a visible homeless problem. And if a county like Collier were to have, let's say, a homeless encampment somewhere where people could actually go to, then it would even further alleviate the stress on this county, which is minimal. Lee County, Florida, where Fort Myers sits, they recently put a food pantry in Rosemary. Now, Rosemary is predominantly a Hispanic neighborhood. There's a few blacks, there's a few whites, but it's about 98% Hispanic. And in that neighborhood, they put up a food pantry that is to feed the homeless, which are predominantly 90% white. Lee County, Brevard County, St. Johns County, a lot of these counties in Florida have a reputation of always putting these types of services in minority communities. Take the case of Bonita Springs in Lee County, where they put their food pantry for the homeless in a neighborhood that was 98% Hispanic at least. And there are no homeless people in that neighborhood before the food pantry. And now this predominantly Hispanic neighborhood that never had a homeless problem has homeless camps because they put a food pantry in their neighborhood. Unfortunately, for a lot of these counties in Florida, Lee County, Brevard, St. John, these counties off the top come to mind. They're going to put their homeless shelters or their homeless encampments, if they have them, in communities that are predominantly minority, Hispanic or Black. What are some of the challenges that this law will realistically face? For one, many counties will choose to arrest the homeless people, but will not provide homeless campsites. Many people in the homeless community are already struggling with structure and will opt out of wanting to be in a government-regulated homeless camp. Many people believe that it's their constitutional right, access to freedom, that is protected. Homeless populations are centered around convenient locations. Having no access to transportation, homeless people are going to want to be near convenience stores and other amenities. The law specifically denotes that these homeless camps cannot be near businesses. Homeless camps cannot exist without access to these amenities and stores, because these people depend on walking to these locations to buy their basic needs. Thus, most of these homeless camps are going to be in places that are going to be so inconvenient that survival in these locations may be almost impossible. A homeless camp cannot exist if there's no access to stores. The law specifically says that these homeless camps cannot be near stores. That in itself means that these homeless camps will be almost insufferable for the people who do choose to live there. The interesting part about all these new laws that the state of Florida is implementing is that they seem to be a superficial band-aid that looks like we're doing something about it but does nothing at all. Take SB-1365, where the state of Florida recently said that they were going to get rid of illegals. I kid you not, as I'm recording this video, I'm looking outside of my window and I can see a Guatemalan digging a hole outside of my building. They signed these laws to get social media clout, for people to listen to them and believe that they're going to do something, but in reality, they're not doing crap. Here we are after SB-1718, and I'm looking out my window and I can see a Guatemalan digging a freaking hole and a white guy sitting next to him watching him dig it. These laws don't really mean anything in the state of Florida. They don't get enforced or implemented. This is just the governor putting a band-aid on the problem so he can pretend like he's fixing it, but in reality, homelessness in Florida isn't going to get better. It's only going to get worse, unfortunately. And while this law, if implemented correctly, has the potential for a lot of good, unfortunately, we know the state of Florida better than that. I hope that these counties in Florida actually do the right thing, implement the law the way it's supposed to be intended, so that they can benefit Florida's homeless population. And those homeless people that want to be addicted, they want to be in gangs, they don't want to conform to being better, then definitely those people have made that decision for themselves. But in reality, unfortunately, we know deep down that that's not how this is going to go. The same counties that push this law are the same ones saying, hey, we're not going to put up a freaking homeless camp. We're just going to start arresting the homeless people. So it's so blatantly open that on one side, and you know what's interesting is that they'll say that in Spanish. They're not going to go say that on an English news network. Yeah, this guy doesn't go on Fox News in English and say, hey, we're not going to implement these laws. We're not going to actually make homeless camps. He goes on the Spanish news network and says it there. I would love to see this guy say this in English so that you guys can see right through the hypocrisy of the state of Florida. On one hand, they're saying, we're going to arrest the homeless people, but we're also going to provide a safe place for them. But on the other hand, on a Spanish news network, guys like, hey, we're not going to send in the no, you crazy, papi. We're not going to do that, papi. No, vamos a meter preso. Vamos a meter dos patas por el... You know, like, and yeah, say it in English, bro. I would love to see this guy say this in English. And that's the whole hypocrisy of this situation. On one hand, they're saying, oh, yeah, we're going to take care of the homeless people. But then they turn around and they say, hey, dude, we're not actually going to do this. You realize we're not going to do this, right? He says, there's not a chance in the world that this would exist in our county. So that should just give you an idea that their intentions are not to help the homeless people. Their intentions is just to arrest these people and scare them away, make their problem be somebody else's problem. So to finalize today's video, a news clipping again from America TV, they interviewed a homeless guy who says he just wants to get deported. He's tired of living in the United States. He wants to go back to Cuba. He wants to get repatriated back to Cuba. The United States hasn't worked for him, but they won't deport him because there's no agreement in place. He doesn't want to be here, doesn't like it. He's homeless, but they won't send him back. What a freaking shame. And that's kind of like the beauty of the legal system, that in the state of Florida, they're swearing they're doing everything they can to get these people out of here. We're going to send Florida highway troopers to the border. But here in Florida and Miami, as a Cuban guy's like, just send me back home, please. I'm tired of this crap. And they won't deport him. He's begging to be deported, and nobody's willing to deport him. This guy's been trying to get deported.
Eso es lo que quiero yo, regresar para allá, para Cuba. Yo no nací aquí.
¿Usted quiere volver a Cuba?
Claro, yo no nací aquí.
That, my friends, is really the hypocrisy and irony of a lot of these laws that are taking place in Florida, is that they're nothing more than political statements, like the immigration law. We're going to get rid of everybody who's illegal. Here's a person that wants to get deported. He's telling the news like, hey, man, I'm getting ready to get up out of this mug. Just deport me already. And they won't deport him. He wants to get deported. He wants to go back to another country, and they won't deport him. These laws are nothing more than just a way for these people to get attention. We're doing this. We're going after immigrants. We're going after homeless people. Just like SB-1365, where they said they were going to get rid of all the illegals in Florida. And here I am recording this video, and I swear to you, I'm looking at a Guatemalan operating a forklift now outside my building. It was all blah, blah, blah. It was all just to get headlines. This homeless rule is probably going to be just like SB-1718. It's nothing more than a way for them to get some type of online clout, some type of attention. We're getting rid of the homeless. We're getting rid of the illegals, because that is what their constituents want to hear. But in reality, nothing was done about the illegals, just like nothing's going to be done about the homeless. Crap, here's a homeless illegal. They're not fixing his homeless status or his legal status. That's a dang shame right there, I tell you what. SB-1718 should have took care of this guy's problem, but it didn't. But here's SB-1365 now. This law makes him illegal again. Neither one of these laws are going to make a difference, because these laws aren't really being done to actually change the state of Florida. These laws are being done to make a political statement, but nothing really changes except for the fact that now homeless people might start getting arrested more often for being homeless, which, if you really think about it, is almost unconstitutional to arrest somebody because they don't have economical means. That just doesn't sound right either way. But hey, welcome to Florida. Florida has historically been a swing state. They want to claim Florida's a red state. Florida's not a red state. Florida's always been a swing state, and I think the people of Florida are eventually going to swing away from this, because even people that I know that are hardcore Republicans, I got redneck friends that are hardcore Republicans, and they're telling me they don't agree with the gun law that recently got passed. We're starting to see teenage delinquency, teenagers getting shot up left and right in every single city in Florida. And we kind of knew that this law would do that. So Florida's coastal communities that are affluent, which vote heavily Republican, also heavily got vaccinated. So the people of Florida, they're Republicans, but they're not stupid. They're not like the people in Alabama or Mississippi that are blindly Republican. The people in Florida are Republican because it benefits them for their taxes. Florida, after all, is a swing state, and I think eventually the smart Republicans of Florida are going to realize that this guy doesn't even represent their values. He's just a clown trying to promote himself because he wants to get political clout. Especially now with the new changes that are happening in Florida, like the increasing cost of insurance, the increasing cost of HOAs. This is affecting predominantly the people that are moving to Florida. They're getting fed up with the changes themselves. They're not liking it. What's always happened in Florida with laws like this is that they're nothing more than a statement. They're not really a law. Yeah, it's a law in the books, but it's really a statement. It's not a law, and it's a statement that will soon be forgotten. SB-1718 was supposed to get rid of illegal immigrants. I kid you not, I live in Manatee County, Florida, and I literally on a daily basis see squads of illegal Guatemalans maintaining county-owned property. These laws don't have any real-life implication. And I'll tell you, the vast majority of the homeless people that I meet are Republicans. I kid you not. I mean, almost every single homeless person that I run into proclaims that they're Republicans. So it's starting to seem like even their own voter base is the ones that they're targeting at this point, because they're not really cared about the voter base anymore. They're really catering to the rich, which are usually Republicans, but you're starting to see somewhat of a flip-flop. And in that, you got people who are supporting the same governments that are making the policies that are targeting them. I personally can't think of anything stupider than supporting a government that's making policies that are going after who you are as a person. Try to wrap your head around the notion of giving your support to a government entity, and that government entity is making laws and policies that are literally going after you. That is perplexing, but that is what's happening in the state of Florida. I mean, just take the notion that it's the big cities that are dangerous, when in reality, in the state of Florida, both addiction rates, homicide rates, all of the worst things happening in Florida, if you look at a county level, are happening in the rural counties. Yet the people in rural counties really genuinely believe that it's the big cities that have the higher homicide rates. It's the big cities that have the higher addiction rates. They believe this unquestionably. There's no doubt in their mind that this is how things work. And what I've done on my channel is try to show people, hey, these are the real analytics. These are really the counties that are having the worst drug problem. These are the counties that are really having the worst crime problem. Not because I care to make any type of political statement, because I really do not have any political affiliations or agendas or anything like that, but I just want to show people, hey, this is the real information. These are the analytics that are most likely real. But it's interesting how then people will try to almost label you. Oh, you're a liberal, you're this, or you're that. Just trying to scare you away from making statements because it's like they're in denial. Like they don't even want to hear anything that contradicts their beliefs. But in reality, there's nothing wrong with evaluating what you believe in. Do I hope that the state of Florida can provide a solution for our homeless problem? I really do wish that the state of Florida could provide a solution to the homeless problem. But my personal belief is that they're not going to do it. You can see it from their intentions, that their intentions aren't to help these people, it's to marginalize them. But the problem is that when you start to marginalize people in your community, the states with the highest incarceration rates, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, are also some of the strictest states to live in, speaking from a correctional perspective. Look at the country of Brazil, what they did with the favelas. Now Brazil has a huge crime problem. It's been proven over and over again that these super strict policies don't function. In the long term, you create an endemic problem. You got a lot of people in Florida that want Alabama and want Mississippi laws to come to Florida. Do you realize that Mississippi is the most failed state in America? The highest homicide rate, 3 times the national average, the highest incarceration rates. The life expectancy in Alabama and Mississippi is about 9 years less than the rest of the state. Why would you model your state laws after the laws of states that are failing? When you look at states' crime rates, analytics, their life expectancy, just overall general health of these places, you should see what they're doing to make sure that you don't do it, because the results are there. In the case of Mississippi, they have the absolute highest homicide rates of any state in the country right now. Why would you want to model your state policies to be like the state policies of places that are failing? These making it illegal to be homeless and arresting the homeless policies, they stem from Alabama and Mississippi. And a lot of people in Florida are literally going to tell you that they want to turn Florida into Mississippi, or they want to turn Florida into Alabama. Why would you model your state after a failed model? All right, guys, just like SB-1718, it'll take time for us to see the results of this law. With SB-1718, I predicted very clearly what the results were going to be. Rural communities were going to lose population, homicide rates were going to increase, and the homelessness would be more visible. And that is exactly what took place. Now, with this homeless regulation, I think it's going to vary a lot from county to county, but what we're probably going to see, the real results of this law are likely going to be not so much that the homeless people are going to get arrested all the time, or not so much that the counties are going to create homeless camps, but you're going to start to see the homeless population shift from one part of the state to the other. As every county implements new rules, those homeless people are going to bounce from county to county trying to find a place that fits them the best. And that means that you can expect, if you don't have a huge homeless problem in your county, like let's say Collier County, you can end up being inundated with homeless people fleeing other counties. The difference between SB-1718 and SB-1365 is that 1365 is left up to a county level. So you're going to see particular counties really start, I'm going to say, there's no other word other than really to oppress the homeless population to the point where those people are going to have to flee to another county. And thus, I do think that some particular counties, Brevard, Volusia, Lee County, are going to go all out on an offensive to try to eradicate their homeless problem, and they're going to flee to Charlotte County, they're going to flee to Sarasota County, they're going to flee to Collier County, they're going to try to leave these counties that are going to crack down on them the heaviest. There's a few counties that are really going hard for the tourism, Brevard, Volusia, Dade. These counties like Manatee as well are going really hard. They're doing everything they can to change the face of their tourism. So it's going to be those counties that have a bigger tourism presence that are going to have the strictest, almost tyrannical approach to homelessness. And if you believe that they're actually going to set up places for these people or help them, it's also possible that Florida's stance on homelessness has almost shifted public opinion away from the government, and they may have to do something to actually help the homeless people to change their perception, because they're starting to realize that homelessness has become just a huge problem in Florida, that perhaps they could even lose power in the state because of how they've been handling this matter. So they could be in emergency mode, realizing no, homelessness is a problem here in Florida, and we are going to have to do something about it, or we're going to lose power. And I know when I say that, it really hurts homeless people's feelings, because they want to believe they're more important than that. But in reality, in the state of Florida, the only thing they care about is power. And that's just Florida, California, every one of these political entities, all they care about is having power. So if they see an issue that could mean them losing power over their state, then they're going to fix it. Not because they want to, but because they understand that if they don't fix the problem, then, they're going to end up losing power. But their general mentality is just to eradicate homeless people. We've seen that already. What the state of Florida has been doing to homeless people reminds me of what the communists did to my family and why we had to leave Cuba. It's persecution. It's making who you are as a person illegal and targeting you indiscriminately, making your life impossible, if not miserable. I mean, you're making a law that makes it illegal for people to sleep. Does that in any way, shape, or form bother your conscience? Because it should. 3 or 4 years ago, I had a net worth approaching $200,000. As of 2024, my net worth is about $200,000 negative. We're not homeless because somehow I've managed a way. So if you think because you have money that can't all go away, you can get injured, you could get hurt, anything could happen to you. You could end up having a surgery, being in pain for a long time, and then get addicted to the medications they give you. Don't ever for a moment think that you are too good to end up in that situation. And sadly, the reality of homelessness is that a lot of people don't really realize what being in those shoes means because they've never walked it. But the moment they walk it, they start to feel very resentful because of how they've been treating other homeless people. Even many people that are homeless will tell you that they're hurt by the things they did before they became homeless, because now they understand it themselves. I see eye to eye with both sides of the story. I see that there's homeless people that are detrimental to society. I see people whose actions are reckless and they're putting the rest of us in danger by their behavior. And homeless people, like I said, a large percentage of them are addicted. A large percentage of them are more implicit with criminal activity than with law and order. And I see both sides of that situation. But at the same time, that doesn't give law enforcement the right to be inhumane simply because the people they're dealing with have an anti-law enforcement disposition. You have to understand that many times law enforcement become insensitive to the targets that they're dealing with because it's what they do. And that happens all over the world. It's not just a problem here in the United States. This is a problem that's happening throughout the entire world, where law enforcement generally becomes insensitive and they can't feel anything anymore because they take their job simply as a robotic operation. But at the same time, now those are starting to become laws. They want to make everything about politics. California, homelessness, and Washington and Colorado. But you know what? There's homeless people in Florida, just like there's homeless people in California. And neither California's way nor Florida's way has done anything to stop homelessness. There's always been poor people, and there always will be homeless people. But to make laws that are tyrannically against these people is definitely something that should be concerning to you, because chances are you're next.